Welcome back, everybody, to a casual Friday edition of the Bet Like No One's Watching podcast. My name is John Sullivan, and I'm a rec grinder sports bettor, just rambling about all things, mostly gambling Twitter. I hope you're taking it easy today. It's a mid-70s day in the Finger Lakes. We got a beautiful breeze here. Took a trip out to the local casino today to cash my NBA futures. Always a good day when that happens. Thinking back to when I bought that ticket back in November, feel like I was living in the dark ages, kiosk jamming. Although it does have a time and a place. But we've only had mobile betting in New York since mid-January, so that's kind of opened up a whole new world for me after a couple of years of betting solely at kiosks in various locations. So before I get into the main topic today, I want to continue on and stress my opinion that championship futures have a lot of value these days, especially if you have a cash-out option, and people don't talk about that a lot. This way you can build and grow your futures portfolio and reduce some costs along the way. And I want to give you guys a specific example that just happened for me this week. So I had the Montreal Alouettes yesterday, and they lost to the Argonauts. But the first 2 weeks of the season, they dropped two very close games. Hashtag great teams cover, because they covered both games. But they're 0-2. And I took out a preseason future at 10-1 on the Argonauts. On the Alouettes. And as of yesterday, after the game, I was still able to cash it in after their 0-2 start for its full value. In other words, I was able to cash in the future using the cash out option and get all my money back that I had invested in that future. So I got out of it without that position, without losing a penny, and that cash that I now have can be used for another future, or perhaps I could buy back another position on Montreal at longer odds in a week or so. So that leaves all those options open, and I think that the cash out tool in conjunction with futures is a great tool if used correctly. You can use it in lieu of a hedge. Like, for example, I had the Celtics at 80-1 to win the NBA title, and at the beginning of the finals, you could cash that ticket out for almost $1,000. That wasn't a position that a risk I wanted to take, but the idea being that if you only had Boston and you didn't have any position on Golden State, you could take the profit. I mean, I had spent, not a lot of money on that future at 80-1, so I could have cashed that money out and taken a certain profit without risking anything on the final. So that's, I feel strongly that championship futures have a lot of value. People in the industry, especially the pro bettors, say it's a waste of money to lock your money up in futures because it takes 9 months to cash. It doesn't take a lot of money to get invested in futures, and with the cash out option, you are never locked in. Certain books, online books, will not let you cash out your futures, but the majority of them do. And if you're willing to check the lines at least every couple of days, I feel like there's always good times to get in and out of positions if you're willing to put that work in, and it's not something that takes a lot of time. So I've started to buy positions in NFL and college football. Still a long way to go before the season starts, so I like to shop the longest odds first and work my way down to the favorites. I think it's a fun process. These long shots, a team that might turn out to be good, that is unexpected, A couple of examples to me are the New York Giants. I think with Brian Daboll at the helm, they're going to be tremendously better this year. I also feel like Jacksonville could take big strides because, number one, I think the AFC South is weaker this year. And it's any teams in that division, I think, is to take. So, though I got both of them today at 130 to 1. So, it's, if you shop around, you can find some good odds. But those are positions where you're not really worried about cashing out. You might put $50 in that position, and it's not something you're not going to need that cash to make another bet or anything like that. But then again, that gets to the Super Bowl. That team gets to the Super Bowl for some strange reason, and then you've got a wonderful hedge opportunity or a chance to cash that ticket out without having to hedge. It's just nice to have those options. And then finally, with the futures, I've got 4 futures left in the College World Series. I could have had 5 of the final 8 teams, but I cashed in my future on Texas. I had Texas at 35 to 1, and they lost the first game of the Super Regional on the road. And I had the other team, East Carolina. The team that wins game 1 wins 80% Super Regional 80% of the time. East Carolina had a big lead in game 2. They ended up losing, and they were devastated, and they lost game 3. And so I lost out on that, big Texas comeback. I think I made the right play, but I'm definitely rooting for Notre Dame going forward. I had them at 60 to 1. I also have Auburn, Ole Miss, and Arkansas 40, 50, and 60 to 1 respectively out of the final 8. So Ole Miss and Auburn, I believe, are playing each other. So one of them will advance to the winner's bracket. But it's a double elimination tournament of 8 teams. So very interested to see how that all plays out. If you're looking for a tip this week, I gave my CFL plays last week. I have 2 plays. I have the Winnipeg-Ottawa game tonight, over 43.5, and I have Calgary-Hamilton on Saturday, over 44.5. If you have noticed the changes in the rules in CFL that they take the ball out on the 40 after a field goal now, so there's almost no kickoffs after a field goal because the receiving team has the option to take it at the 40-yard line, which only puts them about 20 yards away from field goal range. So that's going to increase scoring. Last year was a very big defensive year. They had a full preseason this year. I feel like anything under 45 is a good bet to the over. Like in general, there's only a couple teams that I worry about scoring. Edmonton is definitely one of them, and any team that you would consider to be a rushing first team, and there's almost none of them in the league. But there are some matchups where there's great defenses and not so great offenses. And then I just want to say that I've had 2 consecutive 3-0 weeks in Aussie rules. Last week the games were lopsided. The odds were not that great. I didn't make a whole lot of cash, but I won all 3 of my bets. If you listen to the previous episode from this one, I talked about what resource I use to bet on Aussie rules, and it works for me just like I described it. And if you want to pursue that resource, go ahead and listen to that episode, and you can find out what I like to use to decide on what I'm betting on. So let's move along to the meat and potatoes of this episode. I promised last time that I'd opine on the betting industry today, which Jonathan Bales has dubbed the sports speculation space. So apparently, Jonathan Bales tweeted that he's getting back into the fantasy and betting space. And my particular take on that is now that cryptos, NFTs, Top Shot, and motivational speaking industries are kind of waning at the moment. I have to say I do respect the grind from Jonathan, but the way he often presents himself sometimes turns me off. He can do way more push-ups than I can. He's worth way more money than I am. And he has more feet than I have. So I can't compare to his achievements. My achievements are tiny compared to his, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's earned the good dude seal of approval. Once again, I'm not trying to hate on him, but I respect the work ethic. But I'm getting at a point here that hopefully I can do a better job of explaining. I can't fault anyone for grinding to make a living, regardless of the means. Whether you're a tout, a used car salesman, a lawyer, a urologist, or a feet OnlyFans account. You're trying to earn. If you're just out there trying to earn a living, I respect that. I may not like it, I may not agree with it, but I respect it. What I have noticed that in our sports betting space, is things have become somewhat, for lack of a better term, incestuous. It's definitely not, the preferred terminology, but what I mean is that a lot of the big players seem to have pieces of each other's companies in their respective ventures. And, just to talk about Establish the Run, which is where Jonathan Bales is going to be involved, we have Jonathan Bales, Peter Jennings, Drew Dinkmeyer, Adam Levitin, Taylor Cabey, Andrew Wiggins, Evan Silva, Mike Leone, also Rufus Peabody's projections, all with just Establish the Run. And at least up to this point, we publicly know that Peter Jennings and Cal Spears are on board, literally on board with Unabated Sports with Rufus and Captain Jack. So, there are people that are on both sides of that fence. These companies are not, they overlap a little bit, but they are not really, I wouldn't really say they're competing directly. And, on the other side of the street, you've got Spanky launching his Spank Odds, which will compete with Unabated for the vacuum in real-time betting data. That vacuum, of course, was created by Don Best shutting down. And I'm not sure they've actually shut down yet, but there is a market for real-time betting data that sharp bettors would like. Another reason why, again, I say, again, I'm a recreational bettor, but futures have value because you are not beholden to this millisecond screen changes. If you're grinding certain sports like CFL or NHL, or even Formula One or NASCAR, you're not beholden to these minute-by-minute screen changes. If you're grinding, college basketball totals, yes, you are. You think about Right Angle Sports releasing a college basketball total, and everybody's button clicking like they're trying to buy fish tickets through a ticket service. Anyway, getting back to the Spank Odds, Spanky says it will be free, but he may charge in the future. And once again, that basically means, yes, I will be charging once you've decided that I've made the product good enough that you were willing to pay for it. So, as I talked about before, nothing in this space is altruistic. It's just presented that way to the end user. So let's look back in the day and remember when the Action Network came around and it originated as an app that was designed to help the bettor. Not so much. There's almost nothing on the Action Network that is available to help sports bettors. There's some articles. There's a lot of clickbaity stuff that Darren Ravel originates, and then there's users on the app that keep their betting records, which can be modified, pre and past. So it's not accurate. It doesn't help the bettor. It doesn't really help you do much of anything. But that company sold for hundreds of millions of dollars to the Better Collective, which is an international affiliate company. And all of these business ventures are all trying to do something very similar, and that's build a highly targeted client list that can be marketed to by gaming industry titans. This is why most of them, like Roto-Grinders and the Action Network, are sold off to bigger companies. And you know what? Congrats to the founders for getting their bag. That's what they set out to do, and they got their bag. And they were early to the space, and they made out at the end. Certainly Roto-Grinders made more money than the poor founders of FanDuel. And overall, I know I come off sounding like a hater about talking about this. How do I say this? It's just some of these guys on gambling Twitter are selling you in every one of their tweets, even if you don't realize it. Like I always say, Spanky loves talking about Spanky. Hard selling is the same, whether it's touting, marketing, or betting tools. So basically, in my opinion, Rufus, Spanky, Kelly in Vegas, Right Angle Sports, they're all Salesforce people, nothing more. I mean, they do tweet fun things, they'll tweet about their kid's graduation or their dog or wedding anniversary or their newfound Buddhism or whatever. But at the end of the day, the majority of their tweets are about things that drive their business ventures and nothing more. And I guess maybe I'm just sad that there's not enough educational gems on gambling Twitter anymore. Back in the Groove and Mahooven days, this is like 2015 for me, and maybe earlier. I think I may have found Groove and Mahooven 2013 the first time. If you could usually decipher the jokes from the rest of it, he provided lots of direction on how to improve as a bettor. There was a lot of like Contrarianville jokes, and they would make fun, and even made fun of me from time to time. But accepting that as fun and good-natured ribbing, you could, if you just followed what they were doing, you usually got some pretty good advice. And that brings me to this point. I consume a lot of content in this space, and all of the content in this space falls into just two categories. It's either entertainment or education. I'm the kind of person that prefers not to hear about the good old days of sports betting when everything was so easy and everybody was so stupid. Those days are never coming back. Even I got a fair amount of ARBs as a novice sports bettor back in the net teller days in like the early 2000s, and there was 100 offshore sports books to choose from, and some of them were definitely fly by night, but you could bet on one book and take the opposite side on another, and run through bonuses and cash out, and it was easy. And those days they're never coming back, So it's great that's entertainment. You hear Spanky talking about calling up college sports information directors and things like that. It's entertainment. It's not what I'm looking for in my content. What I crave is educational content. I have no problem hearing the greatest hits over and over again if the info is helpful. Bankroll management, bet sizing, understanding how a market works. These are building a model. The difference between qualitative and quantitative handicapping. The continuous learning curve of sports betting. All of those are the greatest hits. While I acknowledge making sports betting easier for newbies won't benefit sharps, you could still talk in depth about markets that won't affect your bottom line. Like, if you are Rufus and you basically run the golf market because, he obviously has network influence over, the lines, and he probably gets a first hit at a lot of books. That doesn't mean he couldn't talk about, WNBA lines or some other sport that he doesn't, it's not worth his time to even bother with, and talk about concepts in those, in that perspective, and help bettors. It's not taking away any of his edges. At least I don't think it is. So those are the kind of things that I'm looking for, and I realize that people have edges they don't want to give away. So I can respect that. It's interesting. Some of the most important moments in a lot of these sports betting podcasts is when the person says in the podcast, "I don't want to talk about that," or "I can't talk about that." That's where you've hit something important that they feel like it is not helpful to them to share with the public. And that is something that you need to pick up on. That's something you need to write down and say, hey, this is something that I need to consider when I'm making bets. So anyway, I consume content to learn because I know I'm not an expert. New perspectives are always good. I try to share what works for me and when it stopped working. And I'll give you an example of that. I've been betting Major League Baseball overs, and this week I've kind of taken a break from that because the odds are catching up to the lines are catching up to what I was looking for. I would handicap a team, a matchup where both teams' average game was about 9 point something runs and the line was 8.5. So, the line was almost a full run under what their average games would be. And then plus there would be other additional reasons to take that matchup, such as fielding percentage or whip or the OPS or, whatever. And so all these 8.5s are becoming 9.5s, and all these 9.5s are becoming 10s. And, all the 6.5s are becoming 7.5s. And the odds it's getting harder to find the value, and that happens as the season goes along. So I don't know if I'll be getting back into Major League Baseball with all the other sports going on and World Cup coming up, and I don't know what it just seems like it's harder to find the value than it was easier to find the first couple months of the season. So that's an example of, hey, I was doing this, it was working great, and now it's getting harder, and I may spend my time in other areas. So as we talk about, no edges last forever, with the exception of 99-cent Arizona tea and $1.50 Costco hot dog meal. Those last forever. So just joking, but let's leave it there for today. I'm not exactly sure I did a great job making my point, but I guess all I'm saying is be careful of free advice, even from me. Thank you for spending time with me. I appreciate all of you that listen. I hope everybody has a baller weekend, and I'll see you the next time around. We'll have more Bet Like No One's Watching. So take care, everybody.